One word comes to mind for the Reds trade deadline. Meh.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I am a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan. I've been doing this podcast now for 6 seasons on the daily because Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And every single day, we aim to bring you a very accessible Reds conversation, whether it be about the biggest topics in Reds land, whether it be about geeky stats, or even just overreacting to the daily motions of the MLB Ocean and the long season that is. That's what we want to do for you here on Locked On Reds. And quite frankly, the trade deadline came and went. The Reds made a few moves, but meh, right? Like that's, and grammatically, if you're wondering what that word is, it's M-E-H, meh. We'll talk about why I feel that way. I also want to kind of look at the challenge that the front office put on itself for what they need to do this offseason. And then later on in the episode, we will get into the win over the Cubs on Tuesday night, the series win for the Cincinnati Reds. Could they just play the Cubs the rest of the year? They seem to own the Cubs this season, and the big reason why was Santiago Espinal. Here on this last day of July, Wednesday, July 31st, we're wrapping up the month, and quite frankly, Santiago Espinal is going to be sad to see the month of July go. We'll talk about why a little bit later on in today's show. Excuse me, that's brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. And where I want to start today is putting a bow on the trade deadline. The Reds did make one more move on deadline day. They sent Lucas Sims to the Boston Red Sox, and they got back 19-year-old right-handed pitcher Ovis Portes. And on the surface, this is a bit of an annoying trade. I mean, I think we all knew that the Reds would probably trade off one or two of their relief pitchers. The relief pitching market was absolutely skewed to the sellers. And I saw sarcastically, because I think that there are some folks that really mischaracterized the performance of Lucas Sims as a Red. I thought that Lucas Sims was a solid relief pitcher for the Reds, longest tenured Red over these last few years. And they were like, oh gosh, what are they getting, cash? Well, there's no way they get an actual player back. Well, they actually got a guy who, according to Baseball America, was in the Red Sox top 30, and he's only 19. So he's got some upside. And the modicum of analysis I'll give you on Ovis Portes is that they said that his fastball is amazing. He needs a secondary pitch if he's going to be a starter. Right now, he just kind of looks like he may develop into a relief pitcher, but that's fine. The Reds were looking to get something for the expiring contract of Lucas Sims, and he is a friend of the show. He will always be a friend of the show. We might even see if we get him on this offseason to talk about his experience being traded, and hopefully the Red Sox go to the postseason and he gets a good postseason experience through that. But I will miss seeing him pitch for the Reds. So I felt some kind of way about that was outside of the analysis, outside of the objectivity. But honestly, when you put Lucas Sims in that trade, together with the Frankie Montas trade, together with the acquiring of Ty France and all this other stuff, and then there was the weird, barely under-the-gun trade that the Reds made with the Orioles where they sent Austin Slater and Levon Soto for cash. Because I think we kind of knew that they didn't really have anything to do with this team moving forward, so the Reds, they got cash for it, and they, got some cash back. I kind of just feel like, meh. Like, I don't think this was a good trade deadline. I also don't think this was a bad trade deadline. It's just very meh. It's a little bit like this season, where you're just like, this isn't a bad season, but it certainly isn't a good season either. You're right there in between where you're just like, all right, wanted them to do this. They didn't. They did this. well, this wasn't really detrimental. And yeah, it's weird that they sent Frankie Montas to a rival, but quite frankly, they got some interesting lottery ticket. Got an interesting lottery ticket in the outfield back. And I have seen some reports from folks who are close to the Brewers that said that this season Joey Wiemer has been undergoing a swing change. He has shortened his swing. He's done a lot of different things to make it more repeatable and make it more reliable. We'll see if that is something that the Reds can continue to build on with him. There's still lots more to be answered where Joey Wiemer is concerned. And Jakob Junis can help stabilize the bullpen, be a long relief guy, maybe even another version of Nick Martinez, who the Reds could have in a sort of, do-it-all mode. He's either a reliever or a starter, whatever you need him to be. But none of these moves move the needle this year or next year. I mean, they continue to do this thing where a free agent signing or a trade is a prove-it deal, or somebody who needs a change of scenery, or, a player like Ty France, who in his past was an all-star, but has struggled recently. He has struggled mightily this year. Is he going to turn it around? I don't know. But we keep saying that about guys. Frankie Montas was a reclamation project when the Reds signed him. And while I don't think that it was working, I don't know. His last couple of starts really skewed his season stats. Of course, he did have some nice starts, but he continued a trend that we've seen from this Reds team for years and years and years. Even in the bad year of 2022, we saw flashes from players, right? We keep hearing that word. Whether it comes from the television broadcast, the radio broadcast, the beat writers, whatever, they're like, they've shown flashes. It's shown flashes. And that's what we get. We get flashes of greatness, but we don't get consistency. And I think, Brent Rooker was not traded. You guys, everydayers will know, I pounded the table many, many times for him, and he was not traded to anybody. So he's still out there. The Reds could still go get him this offseason. Get ready. I'm going to say that some more when we get into the offseason. But I just feel like the Reds didn't go get anything that was really quality production in this trade deadline. They continue to bet on themselves. And maybe that's, we talked about this, I think it was last week, that they really rebuilt their development system a couple of years ago. And maybe they're just continuing to bet on that. But for us fans, that's not really that comforting, because we are now in year 29, and I think that there's a lot of folks that have written off the playoffs, and rightfully so. This team has shown no signs that they are a playoff team, but mathematically something crazy could happen. They could go on a winning streak and be right in the playoffs, which is just maddening to me. That's why this team is so frustrating. I love them so much, and I love watching them so much, but every time you turn around, you're just like, there's enough positive to make you believe they can, and there's enough negative to shut all that down. And that's kind of how this trade deadline felt. There's not really a lot to be excited about, but there's also not really a lot to worry about. I don't think, and I hope I don't eat these words, but I don't think Frankie Montas is really going to be that good for the Brewers. It seems here recently, his last two starts were very similar, performance-wise, that it makes you wonder a little bit if that is what he's got. Because you're coming off a major shoulder surgery. That's hard to say. And you haven't pitched that much if you're Frankie Montas, and now you're really getting into the fullness of a season. He hasn't really spent any time. He missed a couple of starts because of being hit by a line drive, but really he hasn't done any load management up to this point. So he's just been going, and I think that he's getting tired. Because out of the All-Star break, I expected him to look a lot more like he did earlier on in the season, and that didn't happen. So, yeah, the Reds in a vacuum may have done good by getting rid of him, but it doesn't help the big picture. And the big picture is, where are they going? Which means that they put a huge challenge on themselves, the Reds front office did, for this offseason. I'm going to tell you what that is coming up next. There's just 2 months, well, 2 months and 1 day counting today, left in the season, and that's plenty of time for you to get in on the action over at Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is so much fun, and they make it so easy to get in on the game because you just pick your favorite players, your favorite stats, and you click more or less on those stats. They even try to make it a little bit easier, or make it easier to make more money over at Prize Picks with these little, they call them either demons or goblins. They put them on the player's stats, and that way whenever you pick one, it's easier to get to that 100 times, because over Prize Picks you can make up to 100 times your money, depending on even if you get 4 picks in the same entry all correct. Download the app today and use the promo code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's Prize Picks on the app. Download it, create an account, and use the promo code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB to get a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy. Locked On has your solution for a daily sports hub. It's called Locked On Sports Today 24/7. It's over on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Brings you all the biggest stories, sports, news, and analysis of the day with our local Locked On hosts like myself and Steve, or our national hosts that cover every league. Check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to our everydayers out there. Met a few of you at the stadium on Monday night's game. Really appreciate whenever everybody comes up and says, hey, I always love talking Reds with anybody. Just to remember a few names, there was Nigel, there was Steve, believe there was a Jason. So I'm sorry if I forgot your name, but you came up and said, hey, but always a lot of fun meeting some folks who love the Reds and happen to catch us talking Reds with you. Coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, I believe Steve will be back with me. We've had a bit of a schedule kerfuffle because he's been traveling recently, so he had to work a lot, and his work schedule doesn't always jive with our recording schedule, so he should be back with me here on the next Locked On Reds episode, and we are going to break down the Cubs series and look ahead to the Giants series and kind of give you what our expectations are for the rest of this season. I feel like we've hit a wall as far as what we saw earlier on in the season to what reality is. So how do we adjust? We will adjust on the next Locked On Reds podcast. But the front office is adjusting to a challenge that it gave itself through the trade deadline. I talked about how I feel like the trade deadline is very meh for this team, where they made some deals. They're mostly prove-it deals. They're mostly players that either haven't broken out or broke out a couple of years ago, and so either Joey Wiemer, who hasn't broken out, or Ty France, who broke out a few years ago and has since broken in, whatever the opposite of breaking out is. Falling in? Yeah, whatever. But they didn't get anybody that is a consistent major league player. And so that is the challenge for this offseason. Because I'll say this again. I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. When exactly is this team going to be good? All of these players, and I'm not just talking about Ellie, and I'm not just talking about Hunter. Those guys are great, but they need help. You need CES. You need Noel V. Marte. You need a healthy Matt McClain. You need a consistently healthy TJ Friedl. And you need somebody in the outfield to join TJ Friedl. Is it Spencer Steer? Because Spencer Steer continually gets moved around the field, and while I love having a super utility player, if you have a super utility player but you don't have an everyday ball player at every other position, then that super utility player kind of gets pigeonholed into certain areas. He's played a lot of first base this year, Spencer Steer has. So it's hard for me to be like, yes, the Reds have 2/3 of an outfield. And really, with the way that TJ Friedl gets hurt, they could use 2 or 3 outfielders this offseason. I know you may be thinking Stuart Fairchild is that guy. He's not. We've got to stop this thing where it's like, all right, the entire outfield is a platoon. Like, I get it. We platoon and the Dodgers platoon, and it's a major league thing right now where you play the matchups that are given to you, but it feels like the Reds, like half the lineup is matchup based. And I really feel like they need one, maybe even two reliable everyday outfielders. TJ Friedl could be that guy. And all he has to do is just stay healthy, which that's a good thing. It's much easier than asking this ownership group to spend more money on somebody or asking Nick Krall to be okay trading prospects for somebody, because apparently both of those things are very hard to do. But if they could go out and get a Brent Rooker, and look, it doesn't have to be Brent Rooker. I did see that, my secondary option of Brian De La Cruz is now a Pittsburgh Pirates, so that's fun. But it could be somebody like Brent Rooker he doesn't have to be young and controllable, but he is going to be, I think he'll be 30 next year and still under a couple more years of team control. And he's got a great power bat that you could put into the middle of this lineup. Because let's be honest, CES has the upside of a good middle of the order hitter. But what's he going to look like after this wrist injury? Is he going to be the same guy? Noel Marte has the upside of a middle-of-the-order hitter, but ever since he's returned from that PED suspension, he has been anything but reliable at the plate and a little bit questionable in the field. So as much as we want to say that 16-game hitting streak and the 23-odd games that he played in 2023 is who Noel Marte is, and this is just a slump, do we really know that? Because we've seen a lot of him this year. He hasn't been good. So there's still so many questions surrounding this team. I think if you go get a middle-of-the-order hitter, you go get a consistent middle-of-the-order major league hitter for next season, this offseason, I'm going to feel a lot better about this. Because if we're looking at this offseason and the Reds are going out and they're signing players and they're trading for players and everybody they get back is, well, they either haven't broken out or they had good years in the past and have since fallen on hard times and need to find their former glory again, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed in that, because that feels like all this team has done for the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, Nick Castellanos wasn't that way, but was Mike Moustakas really in his prime when they got him? Obviously he wasn't, because he was not good as a Cincinnati Red. He's as much in his prime as I'm in my prime of going to the gym, which I really need to do. I keep forgetting about that. Darn it. It's like a couple weeks now. But it's things like that this team, this front office needs to get away from. They need to go get some consistent production. And whether that is a hardened veteran, a guy that can lead the young guys, or if it's a guy like Brent Rooker. Like, Brent Rooker is a veteran, but I don't necessarily know that he's like a hardened veteran. I don't know. Maybe he is, but you're looking at a different kind of crop of players with this Reds team than anybody else has. That's why this team is so infinitely interesting. Whether you're a Reds fan or not, you cannot deny that the Reds are infinitely interesting. And you're going to say, well, their record doesn't say that they're interesting, but they've got so much young talent. And whenever Matt McLain and CES are back next year, fingers crossed, healthy and ready to go, then we are really going to be cooking with gas. But is everybody going to be healthy, going to progress all at the same time? Is that going to happen next year? Can you guarantee that? Because I can't. But I can feel better about that if the front office goes out and gets consistent major league players. Definitely one in the outfield, maybe one in the infield. I don't know. Candelario is still here under contract. I heard that a lot. There was a lot of folks that were like, I thought Candelario would be traded at this deadline, but he's under contract for next year as well. So I don't think the Reds were ever going to look to trade him. And he'll be here. So maybe you just hold on to him. But I really feel like this front office has challenged itself through the last 2 deadlines of near inaction. And I know that Nick Krall made the statements of, well, I didn't want to damage our chance to still keep going for the playoffs this year, but I did want to make a few moves. And it's just like half measures and very meh deadline. So what do they do this offseason? Because this deadline has put a lot of pressure on that offseason. But let's transition here, because the Reds won a series. The Reds beat the Cubs, and a big part of it was Santiago Espinal. He's going to miss the month of July. I'll tell you why next. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the biz and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge with joining the supplyhouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds, and you can take the Reds' hometown broadcast everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. Also, make sure you check out CincinnatiRedsTalk.com for written content about your Cincinnati Reds. That's through Sports Illustrated. I'm writing there. James Rapin's writing there. Greg Kuffner, who is at Reds Daily on Twitter, is writing there, and a lot of great folks as well. It's through SI, and it's CincinnatiRedsTalk.com. Make sure you bookmark that today. All right, let's look at this because the Reds got a big-time win, 6-3 over the Cubbies on Tuesday night, sending everybody back to Mason empty-handed. And they got another one. They're 7-2. So, big-time win for the Reds-Cubs season matchup, whatever that ends up looking like, whether that's just for last place or if somehow both of these teams get back into the wild card race, the Reds now guarantee that they own the tiebreaker with the Cubs this season because they will play 13 times this season, and they already have 7 wins. And with one more game to go, they could just make it even more fun. But nice win early on, just offensive dominance. But this game was all about one guy, Santiago Espinal. Santiago Espinal, I don't know if you know this or not, because he's a guy, and we've talked about him before. Like, he came in here basically out of necessity. It wasn't oh my gosh, we got Santiago Espinal? Whoa. But it was a kind of savvy move by Nick Krall as the season was coming along because he needed to make a move to get some infield depth with all of the injuries that the Reds were dealing with. And while Espinal hasn't really been fantastic in the months of April, May, and June, he has gone off absolutely as hot as the surface of the sun, the Human Torch, whatever sort of metaphor you want to use here, in the month of July. Last night, Tuesday night's game, he had 4 hits, his first ever career 4-hit night. And that bumped his July stats into the stratosphere. Here's this, and this is just baffling me. In 14 games played here in the month of July, with 40 total at-bats, Santiago Espinal has a batting average of .425, an on-base percentage of .452, and a slugging percentage of .725. Basically, coming into this month, his entire on-base plus slugging, his OPS, was far lower than his slugging percentages for this month. It's fantastic to see. And he is a guy that falls under the category of a Ty France, where it's like, okay, in years past, he was an all-star a couple of years ago, but he hasn't really had that same oomph to his game in the last couple of seasons. And really early on this season, there were a lot of folks that were like, why is he on this team? He's batting under the Mendoza line. Like, what are we doing here? And then he had a solid month of May to make you at least realize, okay, he's an okay rotational guy, but we really don't want to play him every day. But here in the month of July, he's gone crazy. He has 3 home runs. He has a total of 7 home runs on the season. 3 of them have come this month. He had a couple of doubles last night to bring his total up to 3 for the month as well. Just absolutely hitting the cover off the ball. And he's only struck out 5 times, walked twice here in the month of July. And he's an interesting guy because I feel like we hear a lot about him. I I don't want to say that he has taken over the mantle from Kyle Farmer, but we do hear a lot about him from the broadcasters saying, man, where would this team be if not for Santiago Espinal? Well, quite frankly, his season, his wins above replacement is 0.1. So if you really want to break it down, his statistics for the entire year, he's not been all that great. His OPS plus is just 78 for the year. But it's been awesome to see him kind of break out. I think every player that has the struggles that he has gone through this season needs a month of July like what Santiago Espinal got. And we are here in the last day of July, and, you know, depending on it, I'm guessing he'll play tonight against the Cubs in some fashion, whether it be as a pinch hitter or he starts somewhere in the infield or whatever. But whatever he might do tonight, I don't think is going to damage too much this entire month. 17 hits in 1 month for him. Just a fantastic overall month. And, you know, it's not as if the Reds can, like, hang their hat on him, but he will be depth for this team for the next couple of years. He is not a free agent until 2027. I think that's the underrated part of the Santiago Espinal acquisition earlier on this season, is that the Reds will have him for a while. He's going to help them be at least somewhat deep in the major leagues, and hopefully, you know, it's something where they can get a little bit deeper in AAA as well. But this team understood its weakness in depth very quickly with all the injuries they suffered in spring training, and they cannot expect that to just magically disappear next year. So guys like Santiago Espinal will be needed. I would like them to go get 1 or 2 more Santiago Espinal type players. Maybe a little bit better, you know, hitting wise. Not a 78 OPS plus, but he has been reliable whenever the Reds have called on him. And it's been an important under the radar acquisition for the Reds so far this season. But hey, they got a chance for a series sweep tonight. Nick Lodolo is on the mound. Very intrigued to see how they go up against Kyle Hendricks, who I think if you put me and Steve's age together, Kyle Hendricks is still older than we are. So that will be interesting to see. He should be pitching for the Cardinals, shouldn't he? Like, he's reached the age limit where he shouldn't be pitching for anybody else, and he has to be pitching for the Cardinals. I think that's a rule. I think we should make that a rule. But, yeah, Reds, Cubs, Game 3 of the series. They got an off day tomorrow. We've got a lot that we'll discuss whenever Steve gets back. I'm sure he's going to have some thoughts on the trade deadline as well, so we'll rehash that. We'll also look toward the San Francisco Giants series that's coming up this weekend. A little bit of an important series as the Giants are in a very similar spot to the Reds, although they did sell off a few more players than the Reds did. So that's going to be a series that the Reds need to win. Spoiler alert on what we'll talk about in the next coming episodes. But I appreciate everybody for checking out today's Locked On Reds. Make sure that you subscribe so that you can become an everydayer if you're not already an everydayer. And, by the way, if you are an everydayer, we've got another level for you. Become a Locked On Reds insider by texting insider to 513-597-0944. I'm talking with folks, texting with folks all throughout the games, all throughout the trade deadline, and we'll keep that up as the season goes along and as we get into the offseason and hopefully maybe even the postseason. Who knows? I'm not counting on it, but, you know, if there is a postseason, we'll be there as well because Locked On Reds Insiders never sleeps, just like Locked On Reds, because we are Locked On Reds every single day.